Thanks, Laura. What an inspirational bunch of ideas and strategies, and I feel kind of I've been working in this field now for almost 20 years, and I feel completely inspired to go out and do different creative things. So that's fabulous. Hopefully, I can keep up the energy, I can keep up the rhythm, I can keep up the excitement. Well, let's give it a go. So I'm going to do something a bit odd. I'm actually going to acknowledge country. Australians do this all the time because we acknowledge that we're not on a country that kind of we have always been on. We've got the oldest living civilization in Australia, and as you can see, that map shows all the different countries that live within Australia. Those are the First Nation countries. So there's no such thing as an Indigenous people or an Aboriginal people. There are several First Nations countries, and that comes as a shock to some people. And I'm acknowledging country because this work was made on that country. So I want to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, who are the tribe that lived around Sydney and do live around Sydney, and I want to pay my respects to them and their culture because, for many reasons, but one reason is they were the original teachers and learners of creativity. We think creativity has kind of just emerged in like the 1950s. Of course it hasn't. It's been part of the way humans survive and thrive for as long as we've been able to do that. So I just wanted to acknowledge that country. Okay, what am I going to talk about today? I'm going to use the clicker. We're going to discuss an approach. I've got two big ideas I want to talk about today. I want to discuss an approach and initial findings for understanding the creative climate of schools. So this is a tool you can use in your schools if you want to understand the creative climate from the perspective of your kids, of your students. How do we understand that? What's the evidence for your climate for creativity before you even start? And then once we know that, once we understand that, you don't have to do that. You can start the second bit before that if you want to dive straight in. But the second bit is, how do we actually put all these fantastic ideas and strategies that we've been hearing about all day into a coherent framework? So I'm going to talk today about what that coherent framework looks like, how we might think about transforming schools, and how we might engage with that. And I want to talk about the potential for this work nationally and internationally. So I'm going to talk with two hats on today. I'm a professor of creativity and arts education at the University of Sydney. That's my kind of main gig, but I'm also co-founder of 4C Transformative Learning, which is an now international movement of 80 schools in a network that are all about transformation. I'm going to tell you a bit more about that down the track. So, why did we come up with the Creative Schools Index? What problem is it solving? The Creative Schools Index was developed to help schools understand their environment for creative learning from their students' perspective. So, what do your students think about your school? And does that predispose your school to building and growing creativity? That's kind of the question that we're interested in understanding. And so what we did is we got an interdisciplinary group together of measurement specialists, of educators, of psychologists. The people involved are up there. And we put them all together, and actually our good friends at CNT who are here with us today, Paul and Max, also provided some support for the online generation of the work. And then we put it all together to create a report. It was inspired and modelled on Teresa Amabile's work, and it was an invitation for a conversation. I don't really care if a school gets 1 or 5. What I care about is that we can talk in schools about the kinds of things that predispose or prepare a school for creative engagement and creative learning. And of course, it's linked with professional learning programs, because it's no good saying, oh, look, your school's got a problem, and then saying, well, See ya. It's about how we actually work up the professional learning to actually get in the middle of that. Right, I shouldn't have shown you that. I'm going to get you to do something. Let's hope you didn't see it. Wipe that from your head. Okay. What I want you to do is, I'm going to give you 20 seconds, so this is obviously deep learning, 20 seconds to write down 3 things that you think are the indicators of a creative environment in a school. 3 things. Ten seconds. Okay, good. Now, here's the challenge. I want you to share your 3 with as many people in this room as you possibly can in 1 minute. Your time starts now. 1 minute, share it with as many people as possible. Speed is the essence. Come on, move, move, move. Hold on.
Sensory, colour, texture, light, sound, space.
There you go. I'm a shoulder charge you then. Whoa. 30 seconds. Okay, back to your seats. Back to your seats. Okay, next part of this activity. I'm half making up on the spot, as you probably can tell. Next part of this activity is you can revise your 3, or you can add to your 3. If you've heard some things that you're going, of course, I should have put that on my list. They're a great couple of things I should have put on my list. Change it now. You've got 10 seconds. Okay. Third part of this activity. When we work in schools with 4C transformative learning, one of the things that we try and eradicate in school is hands up. We're trying to eradicate it because we think it is, basically the research shows that teachers run a classroom on 5 hands, right? Yes, you're the good kid. I know you won't talk too long. I'll pick you, I'll pick you, I'll pick you. So it's a control mechanism. What happens if kids have to self-regulate around communication? We've got whole kindergarten classes working this way. So one of the strategies we use is called a bus stop. Anyone heard of a bus stop? Great, I can make it up. So the way this works is I don't pick anyone. 5 volunteers will stand, and I won't tell anyone who starts or who finishes. And what you do is you stand up, you talk about the list that you have of things that you think would make up for a creative environment in a school. And then when you've finished, you sit down. Rule is you can't repeat anything the person that has been said before you, and you have to try and link it. When everyone, and I'm not going to tell anyone the order, they're just going to do it when they do it. Okay, so I need 5 volunteers to tell us what they think a creative environment in a school looks like. Go, 5 volunteers. 1, good on you, Idris. 2, 3, 2 more, 4, 5. You're on the bus. When you've said it, you can sit down. What did you say, sorry?
Collaboration.
You're on the bus.
Courage. Student voice.
Integration.
Excellent. All right. I'm going to do a bus stop on a bus stop, which is a meta-pedagogical, I just made that word up, a meta-pedagogical approach to say, why would I do a bus stop? Why would I have people doing that? 5 people. standing up telling me why I would use that strategy in a classroom? Come on, 5 people, come on. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bill might even count for 2. In a nice way. Come on, 1 more. Max, you lovely guy. Okay, no one starts, no one finishes, or I'm not going to tell anyone who starts and who finishes. When you've said what you've said, sit down. Excellent.
Allows children to validate their thinking.
Gets kids off their butts.
Democratic dialogue.
Excellent. Sometimes these answers are a lot longer than that, but I think conciseness is kind of a thing over here, which I'm really glad of. Australian teachers go on for hours. So, hello to all the Australian teachers out there. So, yes. That's exactly why we do it. We do it because it validates, it gets the kids active, it means kids have to listen to each other, they have to link concepts. It's a fantastic way to do it. And we've got, as I said, we've got reception, kindergarten, I don't know what you call it here. And if you've ever worked in that context, you would know that is bananas to be able to do that. And kids can self-regulate when given the opportunity. So, this is what we came up with, or actually what Dan Harris came up with from Melbourne. And these are the things that he developed from a meta-analysis. So, curiosity, collaboration, problem solving, divergent thinking, play. And that's for high schools as well, by the way, not just for elementary, not just for primary. Play is crucial. We know that from the neuroscience. We know that for all sorts of reasons. Innovation, discipline, risk-taking, synthesis, critical thinking, and the physical environment. I love that discipline is in here. Everybody, not everybody. Many people think that creativity is some sort of airy-fairy, cloud-like thing. It's amorphous. Talk to any dancer, talk to any choreographer, talk to any scientist who's been involved in creativity. They don't think it's undisciplined. They think it's extremely disciplined. And so these are the kinds of things that we looked at. And then we developed a report, this is C&T's work, that can give schools a rating. Now, I actually think that score is borderline meaningless, and so do the schools, but what it does is it starts a conversation. And this goes to nobody else. Like, doesn't go to their system, doesn't go to their superintendents, doesn't go to anybody else. But it does give them a sense of how their school is travelling and gives them a baseline to work from. And then the results are explained, and it maps the results and talks about what you can do if your results aren't what you thought they might be. And we can do an analysis on all of those items by all of those kind of areas. And I can take you through it. In fact, if you're interested in more information, more detailed and more scholarly information, there's a report there, and there's several journal articles on it as well. And that's the kind of analysis that schools get. And these are the kinds of yields that we found. It actually supports a Marbolet's model, if you're interested in a Marbolet's work. There's direct and indirect paths to outcomes that are apparent. So we can tell there is a kind of a network of effects that builds creativity in schools. The big 5, conscientiousness and openness to experience, covariates play substantial direct and indirect roles. So the big 5 are these things that we all have in our in our personality, and that those things actually are substantially important. Direct paths developing to create the environment of schools, so that there are ways that we can do better in schools to make schools more creative. And there are indirect paths for increasing intrinsic motivations for schools. And what's the next word? What's it say? Decreasing, yes. Decreasing Extrinsic motivation. You'd think I'd be able to read my own stuff. Yes. So there are ways that we can actually make a big difference by kind of getting evidence for this kind of work. So, what now? We've got a bunch of numbers, we've got some evidence. What do we do now? How do we generate creative learning and teaching in our schools? How do we teach creativity in our schools? I'm going to give you 3 strategies today that I hope will be useful. I think we need focused and tailored professional learning. What Bill was talking about this morning, I couldn't agree more. We've had models of professional learning, what I call spray and pray professional learning, or bolt on, where people just or drive by professional learning. You know, it's kind of done to you, and then like a bit like what I'm doing now. It's done to you and then drives off. But actually, what would it look like if you had a relationship at the centre of your professional learning? That we got professional learning models that didn't just do rollouts and then forget about them, that actually walk side by side you in this way, in the way we talk about pedagogy. We don't wander in and talk to kids and say, hey, quadratic equations, see ya. We actually build their learning. But when we work with teachers, we kind of go, here's a thing. Here's some computer-based technology. See ya. You know, and then we come back 2 years later. Phonics. See ya. What would it be like if we actually built professional learning? If we actually built relationships and worked with schools on their needs? I mean, it's a bit like our DNA. We're 99%, more than 99%, kind of the same in terms of our DNA. But that 1% makes all the difference. And so how do we deal with that 1% of schools that actually makes all the difference? And that's really critical. And coherence makers, and I'll talk to you about what those are in a sec. And time spent. This is long-term transformational work. So, at 4C Transformative Learning, we've written these books, Miranda Jefferson and I, to try and kind of make the case for why this matters. This is the what, really. And the how is kind of understood through schools, although there's a bit of how in these books as well. And what it's attempting to do is put the pieces of transformation together. So if you see schools as a puzzle, all of these pieces come together, we would argue, through creativity, collaboration, communication, and critical reflection. They lay the basis. I mean, we've talked about PBL here today and project-based learning, problem-based learning, whatever you want to call it. The basis of understanding and being able to do that is an understanding of the 4 Cs. And of course, creativity is potentially foremost amongst them. And how we do that is going to be really critical. But it's not only critical for learning, it's critical for pedagogy, it's critical for leadership, it's critical across the board. How do we bring them together? And that's the how. That's what the professional learning's got to be about. So, it's about transformation, not school improvement. I'm not interested in tinkering with a steam train, perfecting a steam train. We need a new model. So how do we transform schools? How do we take them from the steam age into the hyperloop age? How do we move them beyond that? We're partnering with 80 early childhood, primary, elementary and secondary schools and tertiary institutions internationally. We walk side beside them. We are in schools, we are with them for 4 and 5 years often, working with them as they need it. Sometimes it's intense, sometimes it's quiet, sometimes it's in Zoom, sometimes it's in person, whatever the school needs. And we bring coherence. We work to bring coherence to their work and understanding through a shared language for learning. Now, one of the reasons that we use these concepts called coherence makers is because what it does is it creates a shared language for learning. Now, you've seen a lot of wheels and a lot of diagrams today, and they are all magnificent in their own way for their own context. I'm not even saying ours are better or, you know, more interesting or more research-based, but I want to take you through 2 of them so you get a sense of what they are and how they work. So here's all our coherence makers. Don't worry, there's too much information to take in there. But turn, if you wouldn't mind, to page of this document, page 28. We've got the learning disposition wheel on page 28. I want you to do some noticing around the learning disposition wheel with someone near you. Just notice some things about the wheel. And I can tell you all the research that's gone in behind it, etc., etc. But I want you to do just some noticing about the wheel and what the wheel is and how the wheel works. And then we'll talk about it. A couple of minutes. Off you go. I love that. So don't go crazy. But if you wanted to have a slightly longer response, you could, okay? But if you also want to have a very short response, that's okay as well. 5 volunteers, your bus stop pros now, I don't have to reiterate it. 5 volunteers, go. 1, 2, 3. 4, 5, excellent.
We spent a lot of time. We spent a lot of time in our school talking about striving for your personal best to make the community proud. So we were really focused on the interpersonal section of that, what that would mean in the life for children.
Excellent. You're on the bus.
Creating a safe and uncritical space for students to be able to express their ideas.
Yeah.
Particularly for those who are less likely to do so within a formative environment.
Excellent. You're on the bus.
With written determination and resilience, if you can build that within children, then you can build other things on top of that. If you're lacking that resilience, then everything else will be a real struggle.
Absolutely. Yep. Shut up, Michael. Yep.
Appreciated how the grit opened the door for relationship materials and objects, which was a core element of creativity, particularly in terms of how physical places they kind of cognitive.
Yeah. Excellent. You're on the bus.
We started with a cognitive as well. We actually looked at the word build new ideas. We started that way, actually examining that word building, could it be co-create, and does that actually, where we're sitting on that side of the wheel with the cognitive, does it intersect with the interpersonal a little bit?
Yeah.
You can see that working together. And then we also kind of finished by talking about criticality, where that sits within the wheel, and what might bring that in terms of a disposition or position in terms of sort of perhaps a connoisseurship within the individual, how they appreciate the creativity in different sort of areas.
Fabulous. I'd say think, why and how, but yeah, absolutely. So it's a wheel because if you take grit out, the whole thing, you know how a wheel works, presumably. You take grit out, the whole thing collapses. Very hard driving on, 8/9 of a wheel. So they're all interdependent. They all overlap. But it's interesting. We took it to a school, really high academic school, and they said, oh, look, we do a lot of the intrapersonal and interpersonal. We do a lot of the cognitive, but we don't do the interpersonal and intrapersonal. And what we said is, if you're not doing the interpersonal and the intrapersonal, you're not doing the cognitive. They're interdependent. And we've had other schools say, oh, we'd like a wellbeing wheel as well. That is the wellbeing wheel. How we integrate our academic, our well-being, how we think about it all together is critical. This comes from the National Academy research in the US, 2012. It's all detailed in the books, which are available apparently in the bookshop, not only mine, but all of the speakers today. Go and make us rich. Actually, we get nothing almost, but anyway, you can make our publishers rich. So you can read all of the research behind that. If you know anything about self-determination theory, you would know that really maps onto this as well. And so how all of that works is a really helpful way to do this, to kill off those aerosol words. You know the concept, I talked about it yesterday, but aerosol words, they're sprayed around, everyone thinks they smell beautiful, try and catch them and they're gone. Try and teach them and they're gone. So actually, how do we put coherence around dispositions, capabilities, creativity, collaboration, communication? One of the ways to do that is to create a shared language through these coherence makers. For the 4 Cs, we've got 4 coherence makers. I'm just going to talk about creativity today because that's the name of the conference. I could talk about the other 3 as well because, of course, they're part of creativity, but I'm going to talk about the creativity cascade. So, the creativity cascade is a way for teachers and learners to understand what the creative process is like. I'm not arguing it's the best way to understand creativity. It's certainly not the only way. But for our 80 schools, it has been kind of quite revolutionary in helping their parents, their students, and their teachers understand creativity from the same basis. And it acknowledges, as Pam would argue, that there are different ways there are different creativities. But we're saying, okay, if we understand history as a broad concept, what's a broad concept look like in creativity? It's not an uncontroversial claim, by the way, but that's the claim we're making. We've used it with schools, we've used it with organisations, we've used it with Fortune 500 companies, we've used it with all sorts of people to provide a structure. And it provides a meta-analytical way to understand and construct the creative process for our young people. And you know about the 4 Cs because I've already talked to you about it. So this is what it looks like. Noticing, and we're going to go a bit deeper into this in a second. Asking why, really why. Playing with possibility, which I must acknowledge Bill uses in his work as well. Playing with, not developing, not managing, playing. And selecting and evaluating. I'll talk about what that looks like now. Okay, I'm going to show you an image. I want you just to notice things. I don't want you to analyse particularly. Just notice things about this image in kind of just in your own space. Don't talk to anyone else, silently, and see what you can notice about this image. Okay, 1 minute. Just try and stay off Facebook or Twitter or whatever, unless you're saying nice things about me. Off you go. What you just did then is a skill, and it's a skill that we have lost a little bit in the distraction economy. Everything, all of your devices are designed to distract you. Everything on Facebook, everything on Twitter is designed to distract you because that's how you get eyeballs, right? That's how you get attention, that's how you get advertising, that's how you make money. So we've got to actually work at noticing. And I imagine, I'm not going to get you to talk about it because I'm going to run out of time, but I imagine you talked about emotional noticings, you talked about aesthetic noticings, you talked about temporal noticings, you talked about relational noticings, like a bunch of different noticings. I imagine some of you went, she looks cold, what's she doing in that jumper? You know, that kind of stuff as well. But I imagine you had extraordinary kind of different noticings. And I think our young people needed to be supported into noticing. How do you actually build creativity if you don't notice? If you don't notice there's a problem that needs to be solved. If you can't notice that there are relationships that could be doing better around you. If you don't notice poverty, if you don't notice climate change, how can you do anything creatively to respond to it? So for me, and for the work that we've been doing, noticing is absolutely critical. And it comes to the concept of empathy that Laura was talking about. How do we notice deeply? How do we notice deeply? Okay, so noticing is the first thing. I'm going to show you a picture. Again, we're not going to talk about it this time, but what I usually do is say, okay, what's the first thing that comes into your head about why this person has gained such power and traction in society? And then what's the really why? What's the really deep reason that that's happened? Okay, half of you have already guessed it's this person. Okay, now the first thing that probably hits you in the head, oh well, he's got crazy hair, he's a celebrity, etc., etc. But when you go to a really why about American culture, there's a whole lot of reasons, a whole lot of socio-geographic reasons. There's a whole lot of things that go into this. The problem is we aren't kind of delving deep enough with our kids. The research on on teacher questioning, guess how long teachers take? You probably know this. And I'm not blaming teachers, by the way, for this. The system sets us up to do this. But teachers take, after they ask a question, so can someone tell me about the causes of World War II? They take not even 3 seconds. Not even 3 seconds to wait for a deeper answer. I do it as well. We all do it. I try not to, but it's a reflex, right? So how do we get deep responses? And the research, I'll just move this slide on in a second. The research shows us that actually when we wait, all outcomes for students go through the roof, get much better. So it's really how we build a deep questioning process. And in terms of creativity, you've got to notice, but then you've got to ask the why, really why questions. Why is it like this? Why can't it be like that? Why, but in a deep way. Third, playing with possibility. As I said, it's not developing, it's not managing, it's all of those things. And Elon Musk, who I know is also a deeply controversial figure for many reasons, but he is the ultimate play with possibility guy. Sometimes to his detriment, if you've been following the Twitter thing. Sometimes to his detriment. But that down there is the Hyperloop. It's not anywhere yet, but what he did is he kind of sitting in traffic, he got cranky, so as an engineer he wrote down a bunch of things and he put it out to the world and he said, let's play with possibility. And it's led to kind of this rethinking of what might be possible in land transport. And so this idea is critical. So when you've got kids in a classroom, they need to be able to play. They need to be able to put unlike things together. They need to be able to laugh and have a joyful moment in school. Imagine. They need to be able to really be infused with the excitement of play. Because play is where learning happens. We did this terrible thing to our early childhood centres. We took play out and we said they've got to learn to read by the time they get out of school. It was such a retrograde thing to do because actually play is where their brains start to work together. And there's a whole lot of research around kids who don't get play and their language learning is kind of put backwards by years. And so how we create a playing with possibility approach is critical. But finally, selecting and evaluating has to be there. We can have a million ideas, but what's the thing that's going to work in the discipline or in the context? I can write a magnificent play with waterfalls and horses and all sorts of things, but if I can't stage it, it's pointless. I can do a great science experiment, but if the vaccine doesn't work, it's pointless. So how do we select and evaluate? We often say that creativity is innovation literacy. And this is the basis of how we get innovation in our communities, how we get innovation in our societies, how we get innovation in our schools and classrooms. Because we are working at creativity as a knowable, accessible, supportable approach. It's not it's not this kind of aerosol word, it's knowable, it's teachable. And it's teachable across the subject areas. I want to talk about Beowulf quickly to finish off. Beowulf was a project I did with this library, with this very library. They said, hey, we've got this, we want to reinfuse Beowulf. I worked with Andrew Byrne, some of you might know him, he's at IOE, or he was at IOE. And he came to me and he said, look, can you do something drama-y with some technology, blah, blah, blah. He was more cogent than that, but I can't actually remember the conversation. But it was kind of do something. And so I said, okay, what about if I got a bunch of kids together, we gave them technology like it was a smorgasbord rather than it was, something they had to do, and said create. What would that look like in the creativity cascade? Looks like this. First did some noticing. what you can see in those pictures there, this is one of my favourite university stories. So I had to find a Beowulf expert because I didn't know anything about Beowulf. And if you don't know Beowulf, Old English poem, like really important poem. They had a exhibition here on it, but I wasn't an expert in Old English literature, so I googled Beowulf expert Sydney University, and up popped the bloke in the white shirt. And I rang him and I thought, oh, he's a professor, he's not going to want to wander over to education, and do something with a bunch of kids. And before I had finished the sentence, he was at my door begging to be part of it. And he did this wonderful work with these kids. He worked with them as an equal. And as you can see, the noticing was about the poem, but it was also about the technology of performance. You can see a massive dragon's head there. They were working with the technology. They were noticing the technology. They were noticing the play. They did a bunch of noticing before we even started. And then they did some asking why, really why. Like, why does one of the main characters disappear, like in the first 10 minutes of the poem, and then turn up like right at the end? Where does that person go? What's going on with land in this and territory? What's going on with the characters' relationships? And we didn't get them to write it down. We got them to visualise it. Then they played with possibility, and what you can see there is things that I never would have envisaged. So they ripped one of the puppets' arms off and they green screened it, and they did amazing things. And by the way, this is not the University of Sydney, obviously very rich. This is something you could do in your classroom with dodgy stuff, because we're the education faculty with no money. And then they worked with computers, they played with possibilities around staging, etc., and they selected and evaluated and put the play on using magnificent large puppets for their parents, who zoomed it around the world for some unknown reason. It was even pre-COVID. So the process actually works. It works as a diagnostic, it works as a making process, it works in science, it works in maths, it works in music, it works in languages, it works across the board. And the thing that the Cascade can give you is a way of talking to each other in schools, across year groups, and across kind of different ways of learning, across subjects, etc. One of the kids said this: we were looking how to take a bunch of different media forms like puppetry, filming, gaming, sequencing, and seeing how we could mash it all up into one big performance so the different media forms complemented each other. It was pretty fun, but be prepared to work hard. Discipline, play, all there, all happening. And it ended up being a fantastic learning opportunity. So all this to say, we have an opportunity, and we've been outlining it all day, about how we can make creativity central, how we can make creativity matter, how we can transform our schools, not just tinker with the steam train. And I want to finish with some words that Di Smith, who was part of the Welsh curriculum reform, said, because I think this is the reason why we get up in the morning. This is the reason why educators care. If we ask who then should benefit from the wealth of possibilities education could bring, the answer is a trumpet call. The dispossessed and the marginalised, for whom it is an exit from powerlessness and an entrance to the interchange of citizenship. Transformation of our schools is not an optional extra. We have so much danger of having an irrelevant system which has lost touch with the world around it. And that's not a problem just for us as educators. That's a problem for the kids starting in if the 5-year-old starting now. We need to make sure that our schools are transformed through creativity, collaboration, communication, critical reflection, understanding dispositions, so the schools that child leaves will leave them ready for the challenges that are already upon them. It's up to us to make that difference. Thank you.